So for that purpose, we have this table here. Let's keep on filling this one and we are going to get our answer. So we know that we started with 500 shares, so that is what we have written here. Look back at the data for a moment. We needed to start with 500 shares actually, so let's make that correction. So alright, so we start with 500 shares, starting amount of shares 500. So on 500 shares, how much cash flow do we need? We need 500 times, and we have figured out that this is the amount that we need each year per share, $10.2761. So let us just quickly multiply these two items. So 500 shares times 10.2761, that is what we need. That gives us $5,138.05. And then what is the cash flow that we are going to receive from the company? On our 500 shares, remember the company has declared a dividend of, let's verify it one more time, it has declared a dividend of $1.50 per share. So let's just write it here. On our 500 shares, we are going to receive a dividend of $1.50 per share, and so that is going to give us a sum of $750. So that is going to leave us short of some amount, so that's why we have this cell here. Shortfall is going to be simply the difference between this number and this number. So let's subtract and write the result. $4,388.05. So this is the amount by which we are falling short in the first year. The answer is simple on how to make up for this shortfall. What you do is you go ahead and sell some shares which are worth this amount. So let's just copy this amount here and let's get rid of this question mark and paste this thing here. So we need to sell shares worth $4,388.05 to make up for the shortfall. So then the question arises, how many shares needed to be sold in order to generate this amount? The answer is, you take this amount 4388.05 and you need to divide this by the price of the shares at the end of period 1. Why at the end of period 1? Because this is the first year analysis. You're receiving a dividend of $1.50 at the end of the first year. So if you need to sell now some shares at the end of the first year, you need to do that by using the price at the end of the first year. So the price of the first year is not given to us, but we can quickly find that out because we know from our fundamental understanding about stock valuation that the price of a stock is simply equal to present value of expected future dividends. In this case, if in the timeline you are standing at time period 1, then if you are looking ahead into the future, you have only year number 2 and year number 3 to look at. So what we do is we take the dividend of the second year and we take the dividend of the third year and discount them to get an estimate of price at the end of the first year. So let us do that here. Dividends at the end of the second year are $2 per share. Let us multiply that by present value interest factor, because we are discounting it, of 10% for one period, and then put a plus sign, incorporate the third year's dividend here, $30, and multiply it by the present value interest factor of 10% again for the second year. If we do that, our estimate of the stock price is going to be $26.6114. So now this is the price that we can use at this place to find out the number of shares that we need to sell at the end of year 1. So let's do that here quickly. 4388.05 divided by our P1, which is 26.6114, and that should give you 164.8936 shares. So these many number of shares you need to sell at the end of year 1 if you sell these many number of shares at this price, you are going to generate this amount, and that is what you wanted to have, because your shortfall was this amount. So now coming into year number 2, your starting shares are not going to be 500. Remember, starting from year 1 you had 500 shares to begin with. Now along the way you have sold these many number of shares, so your starting number of shares in the second year are going to be 500 minus the shares that you have sold at the end of the first year, 164.8936. so you are going to be left with 335.1064 shares. Now what is the cash flow that we need? We already know that here, we figure it out here, 5138.05. that is the amount that we need each year to keep our dividend receipts equal throughout the 3-year period. So let's just write here 5138.05 dollars is the amount of cash that we need. What do we receive from the company on the shares that we have? How many shares do we have now? We have 335.1064 shares. So on 335.1064 shares, we are going to receive how much dividend is the company paying in the second year? $2 per share. So we are going to have to multiply this number by 2, and the result is going to be $670 and 2128 cents. That means we are again going to have a shortfall. How much? The difference between the amount we needed, this one, and the amount that the company is providing us, this one. So let us take the difference between these two numbers, and that is going to give us $4,467.8372. So now we are going to have to repeat the exercise again. Sell shares worth this amount here. So let's write it here, $4467.8372 to make up for the shortfall. So how many number of shares do we have to sell at the end of year number 2? It will be equal to 4467.8372 divided by the price of shares at the end of which period? Period 2, because we are selling the shares at the end of period 2. So now we don't know the price of the shares at the end of period 2, but we can find that out again by using our same fundamental understanding about stock valuation. The price of the share is equal to the present value of expected future dividends. So at the end of time period 2, you have only one more period left to account for, that is year number 3. So basically then your price of the share at the end of period 2 is going to be the discounted value of the dividend in the third year, which is $30, and you simply discount it at the 10% rate of interest, and you are going to get here $27.2727. So then therefore the number of shares to be sold in the second year are going to be 4467.8372 divided by the price that we have found out here, 27.2727, and that is going to give you 163.8208 shares. So now coming into the third year, your starting number of shares are going to be, remember in the second year you started with 335.1064 shares, and then at the end of year 2 you sold these many number of shares. So therefore coming into year number 3, you are going to be left with 335.1064 minus the number of shares you sold here, 163.8202. so let's write it here, 163.8208, and that will leave you with 171.2856 number of shares. So now the cash flow needed is the same, $5,138.05, and let's see how much do we receive from the company. we have these many number of shares left with us, 171.2856, and on these shares we are going to receive a liquidating dividend from the company of, let's verify it again, $30 per share. So let us write here 30. If we take the product, we are going to get $5,138.568. So actually you wanted 5138.05, you got a little bit extra here, a few cents, and maybe we can buy a candy with that, some extra cents here. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Bye bye.